Bienvenidos y welcome to the Biz Bruja podcast, where we're claiming our powerful intuition, our sacred medicina, embracing our magic and healing ancestral patterns, invoke powerful creations in our own well-being, our lives, familias, community, and our businesses. Remembering that our businesses are so important at this time. I'm the creatrix of this blogcast, the Biz Bruja herself, Vanessa Codorniu, a modern-day bruja, fourth-generation psychic medium, clinical hypnotist, energy healer, and soul biz mentor and coach. An Argentine-American who started reading adults at 16, became a professional intuitive at 22, and now guides creatives, intuitives, healers, and entrepreneurs to break through fears, connect to the practical power of their intuition so they can serve the world powerfully. Hola, mi gente bella. I am so happy to be here. I have wanted to have this conversation with this beautiful spiritual being for a long time. I want to introduce you all to Yaqui Rodriguez. Hola, Yaqui.
Hola.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to read the bio. I want to read her bio because truly, I feel like in this conversation, we're going to really ground. We're going to go deep. We're going to connect. There's going to be a lot of truth shared. And so Yaqui's bio. Yaqui is a descendant of farmers and folk healers from the Central Mountain region in the Dominican Republic. Through the exploration of her own emotional and spiritual growth, she found her sacred path. Dedicating the past 13 years to study, she has completed more than 40 trainings with diverse teachers of different modalities in the healing arts. Her work is rooted in remembrance, healing intergenerational trauma, reconnecting to ancestral practices, the wisdom of the self, and the earth. Currently, she co-leads national healing justice programs with nonprofit organizations, is pursuing certification in integrative psychedelic therapy, integrating transpersonal psychotherapy, indigenous wisdom, and findings from modern consciousness research. Yaqui, so much. I'm like, as I'm reading your bio, I'm like, oh my God, I want to talk about this and this and this. But I want to start with, when did you, what was your upbringing like? Spiritually, were your parents spiritual? Was it more religious? And when did you awaken to your own spiritual path?
Okay, so first I will say I'm just so excited and honored and grateful to be here. Thank you so much. Upbringing was folk. I would say folk Catholic. So my parents went to church, but they weren't super religious. But at the same time, my dad did something that we call ensalmos. And ensalmos are basically healing prayer that's done to heal ailments or skin things, like warts and things like that. But it's interesting because I never really looked at it as anything, spiritual in a way, because it was very normalized. My mom also did plant baths and remedios and limpiezas with eggs and stuff like that. But again, it's not something that I viewed as, spiritual in any way. It was just part of my upbringing. And they didn't really, it was just go to church, and I don't know, I don't think that there was anything there that really anchored me to anything, if it makes sense spiritually, because I think that what it created, because it was just very loose, it created a lot of questions within me, very young.
Mm-hmm.
Do I continue?
Oh yeah. And so, okay. And I get it. I grew up with egg limpias and I grew up with prayers and altars and baños, but my mom was explaining it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the explanation actually anchored me. So your experience was that it made it very loose, right? Mm-hmm. When did you start to get a groundedness or a rootedness around your spiritual path or your spiritual self?
Honestly, I didn't start to really get a groundedness. I want to say probably, I spent a lot of time in exploration. I would say maybe from the age of 13 to about 20, I would say I was just really in exploration and seeking. Well, I'm still in many ways seeking, but actually, no, I would say I'm definitely more grounded. But Yeah, so it was a lot of exploration and seeking, and it wasn't until 26. So I don't want to age myself too much, but that was around 2006, around 2006, 7, I want to say, that I had like my first spiritual emergence. And, a lot of people recognize this as being close, and I was really close to my Saturn's return. So a lot of people recognize this as a Saturn's return, or I've heard people call it a quarter life crisis.
Yes, yes.
And, at this time in my life, I was like meditating more, like a lot more consistently. I was, like I said, I was seeking, because I kind of want to backtrack a little bit so it makes sense. So, a lot of my upbringing was very loose, as I mentioned. And because of that, I started to look into Eastern type of belief systems. So I started to look into Buddhism. I started to look into Tao. Then I found myself in like Kabbalah, right? Because I was like just seeking for such a long time. And so around this time, I think I was more rooted into like Kabbalah and meditation and things like that. And then my whole life fell apart, to be honest, at the time. Yeah, it was really, really challenging. And because I didn't really have like enough tools or resources to keep me anchored in like these new systems, I went back to a lot of like old cycles, which were partying and drinking. And like that was the way that I dealt with like what was coming up in my life. I was also a young mom. So I had dedicated from the age of like, 19, I got pregnant. I had dedicated 6, 7 years solely to my family and my children. So I was also like a 20-something-year-old, so I think all of that combined kind of like combusted in some way. So I spent a few years lost. And then around 2010, I found Kundalini yoga. So I feel like I've traversed a lot of different things. So I found Kundalini yoga, and that was a lifesaver for me in many ways because it brought me back like just a certain type of rootedness. And then I did like leadership trainings around transformational work and continued that kind of stuff. And then fast forward from like 2010, I kind of continued that exploration. And honestly, it was really like 2016 that I feel like hit a big marker for me. And not only like my own growth, but also in the realization that I needed to pursue like spiritual work more from like there's something more here. And I wasn't sure yet like what it was. 2012, I started to consider doing like Reiki. Like it was just like an idea, and I didn't pursue it because at the time, I know it's gonna sound super silly, but I'm being like completely authentic, even though it's kind of embarrassing.
Por favor.
But at the time, the course was $300, and Vanessa, I could not spend $300 on myself for that, and I realized like later on that I wasn't willing to invest $300 in myself for this. One, because I didn't really, it's not like I came into this like, oh, I'm going to do healing work. It was just like a curiosity. I didn't know where it was going to go, but I couldn't spend it on myself because I didn't value myself. Truly. And I would spend that money on other things, clearly.
Clothes and drinking or travel or party or whatever is different.
Yeah.
Until you understand. And so that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think people will relate listening.
Yeah.
So then you were there, you were thinking of Reiki.
Yeah. So, so it took, that was 2012. I kind of went back a little bit. I jump around a lot. So.
Oh, good. It's all good. We're with you. We're with you.
Yeah.
We're travelers. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. It's not like now I can look at the story and kind of piece it together more linear, but the way it happened, it wasn't linear at all for me, and it's not. And I think that there's an expectation that like, oh, we're supposed to know and like all these things. And also it's a lot more popular now. Yeah. Like these types of things, you can talk about it like openly. So 2016, I was in a job, and it was one that I was already like not unhappy with, and like I wanted to change. And I ended up getting a hip injury. It was my left hip. And I knew enough to understand that I needed to change directions in my life. Like it was like one of those like cocotazos.
Yeah, local.
Like girl, you're not paying attention. You need to do something different. And like you're not listening. So, like we're gonna like give you that message where you can't run away from it anymore. So 2016, in that process of like going through like therapy, physical therapy and all of that, prior to getting surgery, I eventually got surgery. I made a promise to myself because I had the awareness, and I'm like, okay, cool. Clearly there's something that has to change. So at that point then I was like, okay, once I get better, like I'm going to do all the things I've been avoiding. So I went back to meditation, like really strongly, really strongly. I would meditate like 20 minutes, sometimes more, like just really focused. Went back to meditation daily. I went back to writing, which I also had ran away from for a really long time. I want to say about probably 5 years or so. And then I was like, as soon as I get better, I'm going to get that Reiki certification. So that like kind of started in a sense this path. But again, I kind of just went curiously, and at least I was at the point where it's like I was willing to invest in myself.
Yeah.
And then that just continued many, many breadcrumbs until where I'm at today. And I just feel like it's such a long story that I'm going to pause it there for now.
Well, you know what? You brought up a couple of things. The journey is not linear. It can be drawn in a linear fashion to tell a story when we look back. But la verdad is that we all have, ups and downs and circles, and we're not all born like, people sometimes think, well, I'm born to be this, I'm born to be that. You can be born to be a healer, but not come into it till you're 60 because you had a spiritual priority to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To be in a relationship, a long relationship, to have certain things. And so the fact that you said that it's not linear is very important for the listeners and for us to understand that just because some people are like, oh, I wish I had a business like you. I wish I had a journey like you. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so I have always been focused in this because that's what I was supposed to do. I also had a million relationships, not literally, but let's say my husband's proposal was my 8th proposal, right? So I experienced a lot of things that were different. You had to experience what you had to experience. And so for anybody who's listening, just know that we all get to our healing work in different ways. And one way isn't better than the other. They're just different.
Yeah.
And so when did you like really step into, now I know that you co-lead this healing justice program, a national healing justice program. I had the honor and the pleasure of working with you last summer. Yay, at the People's
Conference. You were so amazing.
It was so great. How did you step into that work? And then how did that lead you to be like, well, I'm going to do my own business? How did like...
Well, okay. So that it's actually, okay. So it wasn't exactly like in that way. So in 2016, when I decided that I was going to step into like kind of more discovery around what is this call, right? Because I didn't have clarity. I had already, in that time, I had went to like a training. This is like I'm telling you, it's like a lot. Like I said, it's not linear. I had started to do workshops for women around body positivity and body image. And that was born out of, I worked in the fitness industry for about 10 years, and I did bodybuilding things. And I've been through my own journey with my body, back and forth and up and down and like just everything. And part of my healing prior to 2016, and I had spent a lot of time on, was healing my relationship with my body and my weight. So 2016, I had went to a training. I see one of my old coaches there from like the transformational training I had done like 6 years prior. And we're talking, and I used to want to write a book around this journey. And he asked me, he's like, did you write the book about this? And I was like, no, I haven't. And he's like, so let's turn it into workshops. Like, I can support you. So, it took some time, and he started to support me in doing that. So I had already kind of started a business there. And what ended up happening was that eventually, as I continued to do that work, I had put in the spiritual component, but it was like a little tiny bit, because I was way too scared to like come out and like, I don't know, just really not, obviously the body positivity stuff, the body image stuff, like that's all really important. But like for me, it was also like the other parts around like really being connected to yourself, doing that like healing around the mind, the mindset, this, like aligning all of it. So I had interjected some of that in there, but I didn't want to do it in a way where people would be turned away. So I made the priority kind of like the other things. But eventually what happened, I don't remember, it was 1 or 2 years later. I want to say maybe 2 years later, as I continued my own kind of process and progression with like, kind of like this calling that I wasn't sure what was happening. As I continued that curiosity, I want to say about 2 years later, it didn't really feel authentic to me to continue to put front and center like the body image stuff. And then that's when things shifted into kind of like my own spiritual business. That's like kind of when I started to come out the closet,
So
yeah.
good.
Yeah. And then from there, it's interesting because in this time, I also got a part-time job with a nonprofit. So being in the nonprofit world part-time, and it was something that was really dear to me because it was in the neighborhood where I grew up. I grew up in Bushwick, and I always wanted to like give back to that community in some way. So it like fulfilled that part for me. And then I had like a base so then I can continue to do other work. And then I continued to kind of have these two things that I really enjoyed separately. And then eventually I started to get opportunities in bringing in more of the healing work into the nonprofit space. And because of that, I think it was let's see. I think it was 2021. I got my first opportunity to work with national organization and start to bring, co-lead and do healing justice work. So that's kind of like how things happened.
I love that so much. And how would you define healing justice for folks who are like, oh, that's the first time I'm hearing that?
So I would say healing justice. First of all, I do want to say this comes from Cara Page. So the terminology comes from Cara Page. And basically, like I would say the way that I look at it is being able to bring people back into their own lineages and having ways that support them that are not Western based, because we have a lot of things that are very Western based here. Let's see. Yeah, so I would say bringing people back to their own lineages and having them have practices that support them in the world. I would like to give you the official definition for healing justice, just because the brainy part of me, and I want to honor Cara Page, which is where this work comes from. Hold on. Because I do think that it's important to give credit to where credit is due. And I did not come up with healing justice. But healing justice identifies how we can holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence and bring collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on our bodies, hearts, and mind. Cara Page and the Kindred Southern Healing Justice Collective.
Love that. Thank you. And what the thing that, when I'm hearing all your story and your journey, and I mean, I know that there's so much more. We only have a certain amount of time. And now that you're sharing this healing justice work, what are some of the ancestral patterns that you had to break or heal or integrate in order to be able to be who you are and do the work that you're doing?
I mean, there's so many, honestly. I think top of mind, what comes up is like martyrdom.
Yes.
I think that culturally and in my own family, like women are taught that in order to be good partners, good moms, like they have to sacrifice themselves. And I understand like that's something that comes from the struggle, right? The ancestral struggle that, my ancestors, like they didn't have the leisure, they had to survive, right? So I think that's one of them. And because of that, I have been able to like lean into pleasure and rest. And I think that this is like one that's like kind of opening up more and more, as I continue this path, being on the path of like really allowing myself to align and connect with the things that I truly do deserve and that I am deserving and worthy. I think letting go of my image, who am I supposed to be, look like? What do I look like? People pleasing. There's another major one, but it's not even for me that this was kind of broken in a way, but I kind of feel compelled to share this. One major one that broke is that, and again, up until now, right? In my mother's lineage, all the women are mothers young. So like I was a mother at 19, my sister at 16, my mother at 19, her mother, I'm not sure how old, but it was also pretty young. And I think that's pretty standard for a lot of people, of Latin America culture or Caribbean culture. And I was in a ceremony and I interacted with what was a spirit that needed to be born in the lineage. And I saw in the lineage that it was gonna go to someone that was younger, like a young girl, part of our family. And I kind of had to talk, to the spirits and make a negotiation basically around like we can't do this anymore. Like we can't function in this way. This is not like, I understand that this needs to happen, but it kind of needs to find another place. And thank God, a few months later, I don't know, maybe coincidence, but a few months later, there was someone that did get pregnant, but it was somebody else. It was like a cousin. And she ended up getting pregnant and she was like a little bit older age. She was like mid-20s.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
And it wasn't this like 16, 17-year-old girl. So it was interesting. Again, I don't, it's the way that, yeah, that's one way that it can look. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now, but there have been plenty that I continue to break.
I love that so much. And Jackie, what are some of the gifts that you've leaned into, your ancestral gifts, in order to share them with the world, to make your life better, to help heal your family?
Yeah, I would say definitely like showing up to the call, like answering the call is one that I'm leaning into, and to be honest, I haven't fully leaned into it. It's like I kind of go back and forth and I think it's going to happen soon. It's one that I'm currently working on, is allowing myself to be seen.
Yes.
But it's more than allowing. It's honestly like I realize that it's being safe to be seen, because so many of our ancestors were killed because of these things, and it wasn't safe to be seen. We didn't have a world where it was safe to be seen. But it's something that I still, that's like one that I'm working on. I would say, and this is one that I don't share much, but my mediumship,
So good.
and that was a really scary one to lean into. just because I started to have experiences like around the age of 13 that I recall. And it's not something that I even myself had a relationship with, that like it was okay. It was like demonized for so long. So I had to do my own work on like decolonizing the way that I looked at that and learning the true history and like the value of what that is versus like it's something really bad and terrible and like, you know, you should like run away from it and there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. There's so much divinization and so many BIPOC and Latinx spaces, also white spaces, where that is demonized. And I'm so glad that you were able to break through, because it's part of our gifts. It's part of our ancestral inheritance to be able to connect to our family, to our ancestors, to our guides that are on the other side. So it's like deep. So if you have a message in your heart before we close, something that you would like to share with anyone who's listening right now, if you want to take a moment, if there's a message for the folks who are listening.
I would say that the greatest guide that anyone has is themselves. And we meet people along the way that support us in reconnecting to that, those aspects of ourselves. And that can help us, I don't know, guide and understand. But at the end, like that's already like within each person. So if they feel like a call in any way in their heart, just to continue to like move forward in ways, and sometimes like, you know, it won't be easy, and it's not going to be always like, I don't know, like this, like love and light, you know, everything's perfect. It's a very challenging path, but like if they continue just to follow their heart, it'll take them to where they need to go, and to trust that.
So beautiful. Gracias, Jackie. And where can people find you? Where can they reach out to you?
So my website, it's www.JackieRodriguez or JackieRodriguez.com, Jackie with a Y. Hopefully, I know you're going to share the link. Right now, I'm off of socials, but I do have an Instagram account, and then my email, which is recuerdowellness@gmail.com.
So beautiful. Gracias, Jackie. I'm so glad that you told your story and that you let our listeners know that que, you know, crecimiento, remembering, stepping into takes time. It looks different for everyone, and that we must trust ourselves and trust our hearts. So gracias. Thank you everyone for being here.